There is a file in a Brazilian Football Federation archive that lists him as unfit, fragile, and unlikely to survive professional competition. That file was written the same year he became the youngest World Cup winner in the history of the game. The people who doubted him were not amateurs. They were experienced coaches, seasoned scouts, and officials who believed they understood talent. They were all wrong in a way that history would never let them forget. He was born in October of 1940 in a small town called Tres Coracoes in the Brazilian state of Minas Gerais, the son of a footballer who never got his own chance at greatness. The poverty was not poetic or romantic. It was grinding and real. His father, Dondino, had dreamed of football glory himself and had his knee shattered in a match that ended everything. The boy grew up watching his father limp and still heard him talk about the game with fire in his eyes every single night. There was no money for a real football. What there was a sock stuffed with rags or newspaper tied together with string. That bundled mass of cloth rolling through dusty alleyways was where the greatest career in football history was quietly being born. By the age of 9, he was already organizing street matches in the neighborhood of Bauru, where the family had moved, winning more than he lost, and drawing the kind of attention that made older boys uncomfortable. Something in the way he moved was simply different. But joy in the streets did not pay for food or shoes or his mother's medicine. By the age of 10, he was shining shoes near the railway station in Bauru before school, and sometimes instead of school, watching trains carry other people toward futures that felt impossibly far from his own. His mother, Celeste, begged him to give up football. She had watched what the game did to her husband, and she wanted her son to find something safer, something that would not break him the way it had broken Dondinho. He listened to her, nodded, and kept playing. At 11 years old, he caught the eye of a former Brazilian international named Waldemar de Brito, a man who had played on the world stage and recognized immediately that this skinny, barefoot child was carrying something inside him that could not be coached or manufactured. If you find yourself moved by stories like this, the ones history almost swallowed whole, follow this channel right now, because we are only beginning to uncover what the world was never fully told about the footballers who remade the game from nothing. Waldemar believed so completely in this boy that he took him by bus to the city of Santos when the boy was just 15 years old, walked him into the offices of Santos Football Club, and told the directors with absolute certainty that they were looking at the player who would become the greatest in the world. The directors were polite. They were not convinced. The boy was 15, thin, unknown, and from a state far from the footballing power centers of Rio and Sao Paulo. What they could not yet see was that they were about to make the best mistake of their lives by giving him a trial. The trial lasted less than 1 hour. By the time it was over, 3 coaches had stopped what they were doing and were standing side by side at the touchline, not speaking, just watching. Nobody wrote anything down, because what they were seeing did not fit into any category they already knew. Santos signed him immediately. He was 15 years and 9 months old. In June of 1956, he made his professional debut and scored 1 goal. He was not nervous. He later said the only thing he felt was that the pitch was too large and that there was too much space for everyone else to hide from him. Within 12 months, he was the top scorer in the Santos squad. Within 18 months, the national press was printing his name. Within 2 years, the Brazilian national team came calling, and a 15-year-old who had shined shoes by a railway station was preparing to face the world. Brazil arrived at the 1958 World Cup in Sweden carrying enormous pressure. They had come close before and broken the hearts of an entire nation at the 1950 World Cup on home soil, a trauma so deep it reshaped Brazilian football culture permanently. He almost did not play. A knee injury in training had the medical staff worried, and senior players debated whether to risk the teenager. The coach Mario Zagallo and others argued for him. On the 11th of June, 1958, the youngest player at the tournament walked onto the pitch. What followed was not simply a good tournament, it was the arrival of a force of nature. He scored 6 goals, including a hat trick in the semifinal and 2 in the final itself. Every goal was different. every goal was impossible. The Swedish crowd gave him a standing ovation even though he had just destroyed their team. When the final whistle blew and Brazil were world champions for the first time, with a 17-year-old as their star, he collapsed to the ground weeping. His teammates tried to lift him up. He could not stand. The boy who shined shoes was the best player on earth. Back in Brazil, the country erupted in a way that had never happened before. His image was on every newspaper, every radio host spoke his name. Children across the country who had never seen a television screen somehow knew exactly who he was and what he had done. In the years that followed, he became something beyond an athlete. Santos Football Club became a traveling circus of brilliance because of him, touring across continents in friendlies that sold out in countries where football was barely known. Governments asked him to play. Wars paused when he was nearby. There is a documented account from the Nigerian Civil War in 1969, where a 48-hour ceasefire was reportedly negotiated so that both sides of the conflict could watch him play in Lagos. Whether every detail holds up to scrutiny is debated, but the fact that such a story exists at all tells you everything about what he represented. He won the World Cup again in 1962, and then with even greater majesty in 1970 in Mexico, a tournament where Brazil played football so beautiful that coaches still show that footage to young players today as the definition of what the game can be at its highest. He scored over 1,000 goals in his career, a number so large that football statisticians have spent decades arguing about exactly how to count them. What nobody argues about is that no single player before or since has been so consistently, so relentlessly, so joyfully lethal in front of goal. When he retired from Santos in 1974, the Brazilian government had already declared him an official national treasure, a legal designation that prevented other countries from signing him. Even the law understood that some things could not be allowed to leave. He came back for one final chapter with the New York Cosmos between 1975 and 1977, not for the money alone, but because he genuinely believed he could grow the game in America. He was right. Attendance figures in the North American Soccer League doubled in his first season. His final match was in October of 1977 at Giant Stadium, a friendly between the Cosmos and Santos. He played one half for each team. When the final whistle blew, he stood in the center circle, raised the ball to the sky, and wept openly in front of 75,000 people. The debate about the greatest footballer of all time has never stopped. Names are spoken, arguments are made, statistics are presented. But somewhere underneath all of it is a barefoot boy in a dusty alleyway in Bauru, kicking a sock full of rags, dreaming in a language that even he could not yet name. He went on to serve as Brazil's Minister of Sport in the 1990s, fighting corruption in football with the same directness he once brought to the penalty area. He was not always successful. He was not always right. But he never stopped caring, and that mattered more than most people know. He passed away on the 29th of December, 2022. Brazil declared 3 days of national mourning. Flags flew at half-mast. People stood in silence in stadiums, on beaches, in favelas. The president of FIFA said the game had lost its greatest ever servant. The world agreed. Stories like this one, stories of impossible beginnings, silent struggles, and world-altering greatness, deserve to be told in full. If this moved you, follow this channel right now, because every week we go deeper into the lives the headlines never fully captured, the footballers who changed everything, and the journeys that almost never happened.